Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar The Last Airbender. This week we'll be taking a look at the Warriors of Kyoshi, the fourth episode of the first season, which has the subtitle of Water? Yeah, first season's Water.
Book one, Water.
Book one, Water, because I got a bit lost there because at the moment, obviously, as well as watching this at this sort of, weekly pace with you, I've blasted ahead watching it with Nadia, and we're in the middle of, book 2 of Korra. So, my brain was like, book 1, air, spirits, fire, water, something. There's a book in there somewhere. Anyway, so straight away, I'm going to dive in because I want to pick up on something Chris just said before we started recording, which I thought was I don't know if intentionally, but certainly was hilarious. Chris said, "Oh, let's get going. I'm excited. I don't know. You didn't use the word actually, but you said I've got something to say about this one." Which
I said I've got some things to say.
Which implies that you felt like you didn't have anything to say on the last 3. And I think it's funny you should say that because I've kind of felt with the last 3 as well, because they're just sort of setup episodes for a world that we kind of cover in the first one. The subsequent 2 episodes were adding to that and doing some character work that we were able to compliment the show on. But there wasn't any real meat to grab onto for proper discussion and analysis. They were quite straightforward. They needed to be. They had a lot to do. But we're sort of off on the adventure now. We can start telling some separate, some stories in the world that we've now created. So I feel like going forward, these episodes might have a little bit more not energy, but a little bit more to actually for us to chew on and talk about than the previous ones, which were all a bit sort of slow. So for those who don't remember, very quickly, Kyoshi Warriors episode. They land on the island of Kyoshi. It's where Avatar Kyoshi is from. The island is named after her. She was the last earthbending avatar. She was 2 avatars ago. It's Aang, then Roku, and then Kyoshi. So she's 2 avatars back. And the people there treat Aang like an absolute superstar. He's kind of been feeling a bit anxious because Katara doesn't seem to be paying too much attention to him. But he's getting a lot of attention now he's there, and he doesn't want to leave. But that kind of brings destruction upon Kyoshi, and Aang has to sort of reckon with the responsibility of being the Avatar now, and he has to sort of realize that. We also have a subplot involving Sokka basically learning to not be a sexist, which is the moment I think I fell in love with the show. Is Sokka's turnaround in this episode, because it's done so freaking well in such a short space of time. How they make that character go from being misogynistic to humble and make it believable, I don't know. It's wizardry. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this episode. But I'm so curious. What's the meat and potatoes, Chris? What is it you're itching to take apart?
Well, I kind of meant that it was probably until the last 5 minutes, which I loved. It was probably the least I've enjoyed an episode, if I'm being honest.
Really?
Yeah, there were. I didn't love, and I even know the argument, right? And the argument is, yes, but they're a lot younger. But I didn't love Beatlemania Aang plot.
Really?
Aang with his fans. Yeah, I didn't like it for 2 reasons. Well, one big one. I thought it's slightly juxtaposed. We literally had a scene, and I loved the Sokka plot.
Sokka.
Fucking hell. Sokka. I loved the Sokka plot. I thought that was great. Mm-hmm. I thought the other plot slightly undermined it. There was this really cool, brilliant scene where it's we're women, we're strong, we're warriors. And then it immediately cuts to screaming fangirls over Aang. And I'm like, so these girls grow up to become these girls, do they? And I get I know the argument. Well, there's layered, complex characters, and of course they're a lot younger.
Mm-hmm.
They're we all loved One Direction. I've got a T-shirt with Harry Styles' face on that says "Please find lost boyfriend." We've all got that in us. But I don't know. I just felt like it just felt like a juxtaposition. I think there was sort of that fear. One of the reasons I really loved the ending is because I was slightly like, "Oh, are we gonna go location to location with them chasing them?" Because that was a bit we had 2 scenes of fire, dude. Fire dudes, and then they come and attack, and they've come and attacked before, and the village gets destroyed, and like it's all good stuff. Like I'm just, this is all heightened because if I was just watching it to watch it, none of this would stop me watching. Like, but we're analysing the damn thing for 45 minutes. So
I always love when we do these because obviously the people listening to this are fans of the show, obviously. And I love whenever you, like when we started in Steven Universe as well, there was always this, you were always slightly hesitant to criticize too heavily because you knew the only people who are listening to this are people who like the show. And you really don't want to offend anyone because you're too nice for your own good. But like, you're absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, you are absolutely free to like, if this didn't do it for you, to say so.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm doing, and they and so I was, but the reason I loved the ending, although a little bit like, all right, he put out the fire, but you're still pretty destroyed, and we'll get to that. The reason I like the ending is because it set up a world where we're not going to location hop because they've seen the damage. And this is only episode 4, so showing that we can't stay anywhere for a long time because this is what happens, I thought was quite powerful and quite good. So I did really enjoy the ending. And again, like I get like what I do actually think my kind of minor quibble about the juxtaposition of the two groups of women on the island. Like I did really like the last scene between Suku and the warrior because like when she says I'm a girl too and kisses him and they both go a little bit red and I thought that linked the two.
Yes.
And you kind of got the picture of how they grow up in this town, the residents of it. So I did really. So I came round to the whole thing in the last 5 minutes. But when we got Aang doing push-ups with breath and because also like her like the marble like thing. Actually, the marble thing was very funny.
It was very funny. That is a very popular gag.
Yeah, no, that was a good gag, and like every time it was used, it was a good gag. But it's very early in their story to be doing jealousy, I feel. So these were just kind of thoughts I had watching it. But by the end, I was on board. But there were hype Beatlemania Aang. I was a bit like, good oak.
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation because I'd never really like. Because it's sort of played for jokes, and they are the younger of the, I don't think it is disparaging to say that fandoms exist. And while in this case it's a group of young girls, sort of treating Aang like a beetle, I don't think that precludes the other side of that as well, which is sort of guy fandoms over things. I mean, you know what I mean. So it didn't feel like it was particularly. I think in this case they went with girls just to create that Beatlemania sort of like sort of metaphor almost, sort of so you could compare the two. I love it. Whenever we're doing a podcast and Nadia has to pass through the room, she tiptoes like a cartoon character. It's really funny. I don't know why she can't just walk normally. Hello, Nadia. Yeah, the cat started running around because he didn't understand why she was sort of hopping about on one foot. That really amused me. And she has to, when a cartoon character tiptoes. Do you know the image I'm talking about with the hands out in front of them?
Yeah, like the exaggerated.
Yeah. That's what she does, and she's not doing it to be funny or distract me. She's genuinely trying to be quiet. It's the sincerity of it that amuses me. Because if she was doing it to make me laugh and being stupid, then it's funny, but it's intentional. I think what makes that funnier is that she genuinely feels that makes her quieter. Like unless
but also there's no chance the mic is picking up her walking.
No, yeah, exactly. There is zero chance the mic is picking up the walking. You're fine.
Shut up, Peter.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So she just said shut up, Peter, because we have a running joke that in the Hunger Games books it's very much implied that the character Peter is pretty large. They often talk about him like walking through the woods breaking twigs. He's like the son of a baker. Like he's strong in quote marks. Like they make it, they when in the
This is like trying to shoot an arrow, and he's like.
Yeah, so we always make a joke that he's like clobbing about while Katniss is trying to be stealthy in the Hunger Games. So I don't know. I've had to explain two different in jokes now, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know how we I know how we got here, but part of me doesn't know how we got here.
Yeah, yeah, I
We're
agree.
not talking
I agree.
about
Right,
Peter from the Hunger Games.
we've had enough derailing. Back to it. So yeah, I think they kind of get away with it with Aang. in this episode.
Turns out, walking like a cartoon was more distracting than just walking past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I with the Aang thing, I always just sort of like it's funny enough, and I don't know if this is like bad on me really for never really drawing that parallel. You're right. Are they? They're saying the women of this tribe are these strong, independent women that are like absolutely capable, but yet the younger of them are like One Direction fans or Beatles fans or whatever.
And like I say, like there's nothing like. Of course that can happen. You do absolutely buy it, but there was one moment in particular where there was like a really poignant kind of bit that I just felt was then sort of strangely undermined. But then it's also quite nice that but you kind of go, well, at what point? Because these girls aren't. In what point do they start warrior school, Dan? What point do they start the training?
I don't know. They seem quite young. They seemed a bit too young to be learning to fight.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. Which is, and I think that was my other issue with it, because it's sort of, I don't know. Maybe
at
it's
that age they just do it at the weekend like a hobby. And Hattie's just holding up fingers to me now. What are you trying?
That girl went into training when she was 8. I saw it on a meme.
Which girl? The one that fancied Aang? Are you talking about Suki?
Yeah.
Okay, so Nadia actually knows the answer, and they start training at the age of 8 to be Kyoshi Warriors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's
Fair
why she was
enough.
holding up a certain number of fingers to me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, how old are the girls falling over Aang?
I don't know about that, right? Like, cause they're younger. They're much younger. He's 12, and they're younger than him. They're considerably younger than him. He just likes the adoration, which is what I kind of like about it. Is like this idea that like Aang has never experienced that side of being the Avatar. He was raised by monks. He found out he was the Avatar, and he was frozen in ice. There wasn't a lot of time for him to be the Avatar. I'll get into tiny, not huge spoilers, but tiny spoilers, just in terms of like a little bit of information you don't quite have yet. But Roku traveled the world in his teenage years to learn all the elements. And that's when he sort of got out and got to experience. But Aang didn't even get that. Like, Aang found out he was the Avatar and then was frozen in ice shortly thereafter,
Yeah.
So the idea that, like, a child, that would go to his head a little bit. And I think there's something very relatable about that. This guy especially because we've set up that he's been craving Katara's attention, and she's not really been giving it to him in that way. And I don't even think it's a jealousy plotline from Katara. I think the plotline with Katara is more about her being disappointed in Aang's big-headedness. I don't even think they're playing it from a jealousy angle. I think she's just annoyed that he's stooping to that and like enjoying that. Like, I think she's disappointed in him as a person rather than being necessarily jealous of his relationship with the sort of fangirls.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You're right. It is more that, I think. You're right. Yeah.
So but I totally understand the criticism though, because I'd never really put it that way. But you're right. I think your issue stems if you want to not look at the like exact specific moments or whatever. I guess the issue more stems with the fact those two scenes are constantly intersecting, and it feels like one's undercutting the other. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like the idea that we have these, like...
maybe it kind of feels like we've got two short scenes with fire dudes, then all that stuff, and then the fire dudes appears, which makes sense in terms of the travel and stuff. And I did like that montage of. The word getting round and stuff.
Oh, right, yeah.
So yeah, maybe you've talked me out of it. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's not as big a deal as I thought. I just very noticeably was more meh on it until the end.
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting about the place hopping idea, because you're sort of so just to dig into that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to travel across the world, and obviously for the show to have stories, we can't just spend all the episodes of them just up on Appa traveling. They're going to have to keep stopping for supplies and for stories to happen, right? So when you're saying like this idea of they're going to be constantly sort of travel hopping, are you sort of saying like you don't want them to be visiting new places every week, or are you saying you don't want them to settle somewhere?
No, I'm saying I don't want new places and zany adventures in those new places. I'd quite like, some weeks it's a new place and there's a zany adventure. Sweet. Some weeks it's a new place and there's a hint to the wider mythology. Sweet.
Right,
Sometimes
right.
they're-
So
do you
it's
know
not
what I mean?
really linked to the locations. It's more just that you were a little more sort of the distracted nature of the episode, not really adding to the overall mythology. Maybe then is more of the concern than it is the location element of it.
Maybe, but again, and I'm not trying to create a caveat here for to lessen it for the fans. Concern is too big a word. Do you know what I mean? Like observation.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So something about this episode didn't quite gel with you, and I'm just trying to dig in a little bit and see if we can figure out like the mechanics of what that was.
I think
it's interesting that this is the first episode. Because for me, when I rewatched it recently with Nadia, this was the first episode. I was like, "Oh, Avatar, here we go." Because like the first three, I very much enjoy, but they are just setting up a world. It's a world that I particularly am very familiar with. So those episodes don't hit me as hard as like once we're off on the adventure and we're actually getting stories and like stuff like that and like growth, and particularly Sokka's growth in this episode is always the thing I strongly remember from it, and obviously introducing the Kyoshi Warriors. I really like a cool episode for me, and a big pivotal one. It's always the point I feel like Avatar's here. I don't know why, but this episode is always sort of the start of the show almost for me.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the bit that did make me do that, and to be fair, you're right. 'Cause it's the fourth episode. It's the first one after. It makes sense for them to do kind of a more story of the week story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is just looking for a criticism. But the element of that I most noticed of what you're talking about is the comedy. I was like, oh, there's a lot more comedy in this than there was in the first three. And I didn't even particularly go bad thing, good thing. Like I say, the marble thing I found hysterical. But I was acutely aware, and I was like, I wonder if this is the tone going forward, or whether this is just a particularly funny episode.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily sort of spoil how they balance it, but I will say that the show feels comfortable to be funny when they want it to be funny, and when they're having when there are episodes that are less heavy, they are freer to do comedy without it detracting from the drama, so they do. And when the episodes require more drama, then they may slip in a few jokes, but they know where the focus needs to be. I always found that the show, on episode to episode, always feels imbalanced with comedy, because there are some episodes that are like laugh at a minute. Like there's one particular episode from season 3 that when me and Nadia rewatched it, we were just in stitches for like 20 straight minutes. But I think that's because so that would make the show seem imbalanced on the surface, knowing there are episodes that funny, when there are episodes we hardly laughed at all. Not because they're bad episodes, just because they were more focused on the drama. I think on the whole, they just know when they can get away with it and when they can't. And you keep in mind as well, I mean, these are kids. At best, was Sokka 16 and Aang's 12? Is that I think that's the age range. So it makes sense to me that they're not going to be all serious all the time. And taking your opportunity to be a little bit more light when you can is probably right, because ultimately, if you're a kid on this, quite serious adventure, essentially there's a war happening and the world is looking to you to solve it. I don't blame Aang for wanting to, ride elephant koi and
ride elephant fish. Yeah,
I don't blame him for wanting to do that. And as well, I will say one thing I think I really respect about the show is they definitely set up that because they had that moment. In fact, the mission statement for the whole show really is in the end of that second episode, the second part of the first story, when they're leaving the southern water tribe, and Aang is like, we're going to go to the northern water tribe, we're going to learn how to waterbend, and I'm going to help the world and all that stuff. And he's like, but first we're going to go here and we're going to go here, and I can ride the elephant koi here, and I can do this here, and I can do
definitely.
You already have a sense of that chaos. And then they re-establish this episode with that really funny moment with Zuko, where he's like, he's like, because Zuko is only looking at it from that serious perspective and not really thinking of Aang as the child he is. And he's like, oh, he's an evasive mastermind, because he's all over the place on the map. Which is just because Aang wants to go do a bunch of weird shit.
They also set it up when you have the big dramatic moment where he first appears, and it's kind of got that amazing animation and all this kind of dramatic music. And then he's like, "Can we go penguin sledding?" So yeah, it is absolutely in keeping with the tone, and I think they balance those tones even. As well as doing it over the show, across the show and across the episodes, even within this episode, like the end where he's got the dragon sea monster and he sprays the water everywhere, and when he fucking jumps off and zooms down into the water, like it's so cool and action packed and dramatic,
Mm-hmm. And it's such a little victory, and what I love about that, and I know I think you might actually have some like criticism relating to that, because it's like. For me, because I had a feeling what you were going to say was, the town's still ruined. That's hardly a victory, that he put the fires out. But I think that's what's so powerful about that ending for me, is the undertone of just how hopeless this is. All he could do in that moment to help those people was put the fire out. These people are like, and this goes for the wider world, are kind of screwed, and like right now all he's able to do is put these small fires out because he can't stop the Fire Nation. He's not a fully realized Avatar yet. He's not learned all the elements. He's still very young, so I could see as an individual episode storyline beat. You're like, well, the good guys didn't exactly win, but it kind of plays it like they did. I actually see it as kind of a bittersweet thing, where Aang took the little victory he could get, but knew and was very heavily reminded of the situation he's in, which I thought actually added a lot of weight to the episode. But I totally see the criticism as well, though.
Well, I think I was more referring to the dude from the village or town, whatever you'd call it.
Yeah.
Going,
yeah.
oh, thank you. Going, thank you, Avatar. It was because no one's wrong in this scenario. No one's done anything deliberately. Mm-hmm. It was just, I don't know if we needed to necessarily cut. Like they could, maybe better than, oh, thank you, Avatar would have been like them coming out, the ship's going, and or maybe cut to them trying to put out the fire. Or them struggling with that, then Aang does that thing, and then they look relieved and they smile up at him. Maybe that would have been less jarring for me than like thank God you were here. Like our town wouldn't be destroyed at all if you hadn't come. But thank you for putting out the fire. Yeah,
I understand.
I think maybe that would fit better.
I do understand what you're getting at. I think the intention was like he didn't need to do that. He risked himself to put the fire out. But he knew it was the right thing to do. But it doesn't come across that way necessarily in the edit. And I agree, they could have maybe slightly rearranged the scenes to make that clearer. Maybe added like one shot of like them trying to put out the fire so you understood the problem and understood Aang solving it was a big help, And I would say as well, the other thing, it would be nice, and I maybe they have this and I didn't notice it because I only watched it. I watched this the once because last time I watched it was only a couple of weeks ago, so I didn't watch this twice leading into this episode. But did they actually establish the Fire Nation leaving? Like they say it, they verbally say they're only here for Aang. If we leave, they will leave. But when Aang leaves, do you see them retreating at all? Do they show that?
Fire Dude says they're getting away. Go back to the ship and make sure you don't lose them this time, or something. Right.
Okay, so they do establish it then. Okay, cool. Because
it's not like the townspeople see them going away.
No, yeah, which again might be nice to show them sort of relieved at the It's almost like this episode spends a little too much time doing all of the comedy and the Aang Beatlemania stuff. So that when they get to the more dramatic element at the end, they don't have enough time to elaborate on that as much as they might have benefited from. Like, maybe the drama would have hit harder had we taken, like, maybe a minute out of the earlier parts of the episode and added just 2 or 3 sort of 10, 20-second shots to make that stuff clearer in the end. Would it have had more impact, I wonder?
Yeah, and I think you could. I think that's why I seem frustrated with the Beatlemania stuff, because you can cut some of that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of it is funny, but you're right. It doesn't necessarily, once you've established it, it doesn't really add to the story.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do love, there's so many great jokes in this episode, but I just want to point out Foaming Mouth Guy.
Oh, I had a real problem with that. What is that? That's not is that kid having a seizure? That was one of my... Actually, I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because I watched it like half an hour before we started recording. That really bugged me. I was like, what the fuck is that about? Excuse my language.
So apparently in the
script, I didn't find that funny at all. Like, what was happening? That was so weird. I was so distracted for the next 5 minutes going... What was going on with that kid whose mouth foamed with excitement? And then he seemed to choke on the foam. It was like he had a seizure or something. It was not cool. It was weird.
Yeah, it was like he'd had a seizure and all you were doing was like, is anyone checking on him? They're all off like meeting the Avatar. Has anyone made sure that guy's okay?
That was so weird, man. That was so weird.
So for some context, my understanding of the foaming mouth guy is that what happened was in the script, it was just a guy would come out and go, that's the Avatar, it just established a rampant excitement for him. But apparently the actor went nuts when doing it, who apparently is one of the writers on the show. He's just a little, he did the scream. And when they were animating it, originally he didn't have the foam, but because he went so big on the performance, they decided to lean straight into it.
I'm sorry, Dan. I'm sorry, buddy. If this was live action, filmed on set in Hawaii, where you can't go back and you can't do retakes, but I'm sorry, the actor did it that way, so we had no choice.
They enjoyed what the actor did, and they wanted to lean into what he'd done. They liked what he'd done. It wasn't like they were sat there going, "Oh, that's a bad take," and didn't ask him to do it again. They enjoyed it and lent into it.
No one even checked on the kid. It was like, what is
what society is
in this village?
That kid might have died.
There are no rules in this village. I'm so glad you brought that up, because but you brought it up in the context, oh yeah, funny moments, horrifying moments. Body horror, scary movie moments.
Oh man. Oh, that's tickled me, that is.
It's in all those films where they take... What's a really famous one? Where they take the pills out their teeth and they bite down on them, and then they... I think it happens in Captain America, the First Avenger. Like that guy, who steals the serum.
You're talking about cyanide?
Yeah. It's like he got so excited by Aang, he accidentally popped a cyanide tablet. It was weird. But I do agree with you that Suku's storyline was the most engaging part of the episode. And the bit where what I loved was they didn't bother with, and again, not to keep hearkening, but I think the comparison is it's like we kept going back to like the Beatlemania stuff. But with that storyline, what I loved is it's not like he came round at the very end. Like halfway, he sees them kick ass, and then he sees them kick ass again, and then he just goes, "It would be an honor to learn from you." And I was just like, that is a man who has learnt some stuff and is acting on it and is trying to grow as a person. That was some great writing. The moment where he apologizes and requests to be taught by them is fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite moments in the whole show. It's just Sokka didn't need to be shown with it being being hit around the head by it, like you would probably do in a more traditional version of this story. You'd have it happen at the end where he realised he'd been wrong or whatever. But not because he's a good person that realises these sorts of things and thinks about how he's behaving, but because something physically bad would have come from him doing that. And instead they just went, no, he's a smart kid. He's made a mistake. He's been wrong. He's misjudged. There's a misogyny to what he's done. He's seen the error of his ways, and he's going to go on hand and knee and apologize and ask to be trained by them and show them the utmost respect, the respect they obviously deserve. And the juxtaposition from who are the guys who ambushed us, because it couldn't have been you're just a bunch of girls, to I'd be honoured if you trained me. It's a really, really brilliant shift, and it says a lot about his character, but it also says a lot about the show, I think, and the ethos of the show.
I'd agree with that.
And because it's a show that multiple times looks at feminist angles, patriarchy, things like that. And this is one of the smaller storylines about it. But like the boldness as well to have a main character essentially start an episode as a misogynist, like that's quite.
Yeah, but do you think that's more jarring to? Because I mean, it made me wince. Like it really made me cringe. It was horrible. Do you think that's more jarring in a modern context? In a world where.
I mean, if it is, then maybe they were ahead of the game with this, with this storyline.
Oh, it's hugely commendable. I think it's awesome. Like, I'm just wondering
because if you had this storyline in a show today, it would be accused of being modern day social justice warrior nonsense, like by the right wing guys, wouldn't it? It'd be all. The SJW's ruining. Like if they put this plot in Doctor Who, it would be decried as Doctor Who's gotten too political. As always. And
do you think? But do you think even when this first aired, and it's a good thing? Do you think people would have even described him as a misogynist? Probably not. It would have just been like, oh, he's being silly, but for some reason he turns around. Like it's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting.
When all the episodes, and we discussed it on MBS. We don't need to go into it here, but all the episodes of like 30 Rock and Community and stuff that have been pulled, and you kind of go. But those, and I know that's a race thing, not a sexism thing. But you kind of go, that was only like it's not like 30. We're not talking about the 70s here. We're not talking about the 60s. Like there's a naught when this show aired. Like so, yeah. I just think it's so interesting. But. In a way, it doesn't matter because the point is the lesson the character learns, and the lesson the character learns should have rung true then, and it should ring true now. That that's his attitudes at the beginning were wrong.
Absolutely, and the show makes that very clear by having him constantly fall on his ass, both literally and figuratively. Whenever he tries to prove that point or make that point, he's proven wrong very quickly. So yeah. So it's the Kyoshi Warriors themselves are really interesting, like a warrior sect, sort of kind of styled after an old Avatar. Well, I suppose the place is called Kyoshi, so you could argue they're named after where they come from. But the makeup makes them very much.
Yeah, they were dressed like the statue, weren't they?
Yeah, they are dressed in the style of Avatar Kyoshi, so I guess it's a bit of both. Suki as a character, do you think, like, from your perspective, do you think she's a character you'd think about bringing back if you were in?
I'd love to see her again. But I love a good love story. I thought they had great chemistry. I thought the kiss on the cheek was very sweet. I'd absolutely love to see her again. It weirdly
reminded me a little bit of the first Cory and Topanga kiss from Boy Meets World, the very first one in season 1.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's why I liked it so much.
My most recent reference point for that.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely want to bring her back again. I think the key thing for me is these episodes are doing such a good job. Well, I suppose this is the first one really in terms of lessons, but of teaching those lessons. And I know in sitcoms especially true of Boy Meets World, you learn a lesson and then that lesson gets forgotten. But I really hope this show feels cleverer than that. So I hope we don't hear out of Suku's... Is it Suku? Sokka, sorry. Out of I hope we don't hear out of Sokka's mouth again, oh, but you're a girl. Because he did that with his sister in the first episode. I hope that lesson's learned now. I hope we don't go back on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on whether they come back to it because obviously I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, certainly something to keep out for. And it's certainly something I was like, I remember it was almost like a test for the show for me. Was Avatar different to every other animated show? Because keep in mind that, and they say this in one of the documentaries that was made about this, where they were talking with the writers, most animated shows at the time of this coming out, it's obviously not necessarily fully talking about kid shows, but a lot of animated shows were family sitcoms. They were your Simpsons, your Family Guys and stuff. A lot of the big 20-minute shows at that point were those. And this was such a different thing. But I remember thinking, even with the kid shows at the time, every week the characters and plots just reset. that old Simpsons thing of like every week, we're back at zero. Whatever they learnt the week before is gone. For me, this was kind of the first test of whether this show was going to fall into that trap, because I sort of, like you, remember finishing this episode and distinctly thinking like they better stick to that, because like I'll respect the show a lot more if they do. It's definitely a thought that occurred to me also when I watched it originally.
So speaking of your thoughts, what other notes you got? What trivia you got?
I don't think I've got any other notes. I think we covered everything. I do like Aang's trip with the marble. I think that is good. We've already talked about the being a master of evasive maneuvers, which is one of my favourite gags in the whole episode. I haven't talked about it, but in the Beatlemania montage, as it were, the bit where the guy is trying to paint or draw Aang, and every time he lifts it up, there are more girls there. I don't know why, but that gets a laugh out of me every time. Yeah.
I will say, in terms of the Beatles stuff, I criticised it as an example, but I did actually really like the visuals of Aang doing push-ups with just his breath. That was cool.
Yeah, because it's unexpected, because he goes to one hand from two, and then you're like, well, where does it go? Where does he go from here? Because there's usually like there'd be two escalations, and then he lets his other hand go, and it's doing it with his breath. It's very good. I like I do just like the opening of the episode when they're just like, on the beach, just like he wants to ride an elephant koi, and he's such a child. It's mom, look at me, look at me, mom. Katara's like, yeah, whatever, like not at all impressed.
Yeah,
I do like the moment they apologize to each other.
No, she's impressed. She's impressed on the. She's not impressed with the marbles. She's impressed on the beach. She's just distracted. She actually on the beach is more impressed than Sokka. On the beach, she's waving back at him and stuff.
Yeah,
it's just Alpa goes to like eat something or something. Like
well, no, isn't the point of that when they see the bigger fish and they're waving to try and get his attention, and he thinks they're like really egging him on?
That as well. Yeah,
So I thought that was really cool.
The animation on that big fish every time it was seen was spectacular.
Yeah, the animation is. I noticed it starts to take a big step up from the first couple. I think they really figured out how the motions should look. I feel like they were still experimenting a bit in the first episode or two with how to make the characters move smoothly. It feels like in these episodes now, we're starting to see them sort of really know how to work with the designs they've got and with the movements they want to do to create those sort of like, because Aang is a very sort of like he's smooth and sort of like light on his feet, and there has to be a lightness to him. You don't want him to feel too weighty. So he's probably a difficult character to animate, but the bit in this when they have him tied up and he hops up, undoes his cuffs, and then slowly floats to the line like a feather. It's beautifully done. They knew exactly when to sort of like show him having momentum and then losing that momentum and then gaining it again. It looked something about the physics of it felt like real, even though he's doing something that's not possible for a human. The physics felt authentic, and I feel like some of the times in the first two episodes, like when he was jumping off the ship with Katara, and I know it was from a distance because we were looking at that through Zuko's like spyglass, but the weight of the character didn't look right. He was sort of hopping, and these arcs were just kind of like they were equal. Like you couldn't see his weight shifting as he jumped. I know that seems really petty and picky, but just to make my point, in this it felt like they thought a lot more about when he'll have momentum, when it'll slow down because he's airbending. They really did, and they sort of were doing that in the other episodes, but I feel like they sussed it out, particularly with Aang in this episode. And it's the same when Sokka is fighting Suki. When she's shifting her weight to unbalance him, that's animated really well as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So yeah.
You got any triv?
Let's have a gander. I don't understand it. I've written down something and I'm trying to figure it out. What is it? Girls come quickly. Oh, the moment we know that Sokka's on board is when someone yells, "Girls, come quickly!" and Sokka's like, "Hey, I'm not whatever," and then just goes along with it. Like, fine,
that was
I'm
great.
one of the girls.
A nice bit of a nice way of further demonstrating that character growth.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's all of those. So. Let's have a look at the triv then. I was just double checking my notes because I didn't really go to my notes a lot during this, so I was just making sure I'd covered everything.
course.
So let's
No
have a
problem
look
at all.
then. Oh yeah, Aang's statement to Sokka early on about not needing pants, where they're heading, becomes a reality later when Sokka ends up wearing a dress as part of the Kyoshi Warrior uniform.
Oh, that's clever. That's good writing.
I enjoyed that too. You're not going to need pants where we're going. We're going to go ride the koi fish, but also you're going to learn to be humble.
Yeah.
The same very old Nickelodeon website that was separate from the main one also gave away the working title for this one, which was actually just Kyoshi Island. Obviously, eventually renamed the Warriors of Kyoshi. The fighting style of the Kyoshi Warriors is similar to the waterbending tactic of turning defense to offense, which is actually a tactic of real life ninjutsu. So there's even though they have earthbending origins and were clearly sort of on the edge or within the Earth Kingdom, there's a bit of the Water Tribe techniques have sort of seeped in. You find that occasionally in the show where there are certain bending disciplines or certain groups that have there's a firebending technique that comes up later, and the way some of the firebenders learnt to do it was by studying waterbenders. So it's there's sometimes you get these points where the show sort of shows how the cultures can merge, fusions of things, which makes it feel all authentic as well, because when you make them all feel very separate, it doesn't feel very realistic, does it? I mean, you know, when cultures share a planet the way they do on our actual planet, then you get these melting points where things cross over, and it happens. I mostly think of it in terms of food, which is because I'm a fat pig. How there's certain foods that are very popular in England are only popular because they were invented somewhere else and then sort of came over. Some of the most popular foods in the UK include Indian food. Even pizza, obviously not originally
Italian,
British dish. Italian's quite popular over here. So yeah, that's my real world context for culture is pizza. Obviously, the scene in which the girls are chasing Aang is based on the Hard Day's Night film. Sokka is the first outsider to become a Kyoshi warrior. They make that point in the trivia. It's not really trivia as such, but I suppose it's because it's not really confirmed in the episode though. So I guess they're just adding.
Sometimes trivia is we found this on Steven Universe. Sometimes the trivia is just plot points.
Yeah, well, that plot point at least isn't directly addressed here. It's in the episode they don't say he's the first outsider to become a Kyoshi warrior.
Because if that's all the training you need to do to become a warrior, then no wonder everyone's having a good old time chasing Aang around.
Yeah,
we got this
quickly.
in half an afternoon. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, he does seem to pick it up very quick though. He does, but
I'm not sure he's been inducted though.
No, that's fair. That is fair. There is a small continuity error with this episode. So they refer to Avatar Kyoshi having been born on the island. There's a later episode in which they sort of suggest it's more of an adopted home for her rather than the place she was actually born. We'll come back to that when that episode comes up, but it's interesting that there's a tiny little inconsistency there. But you could always put that down to just historically, it's 400 years ago. Who actually knows necessarily for sure where she was born?
Yeah,
there are lots of historical figures 400 years in our past that we don't, that there are elements of their history debated by historians. So I think you can sort of brush that one away. But there you go. That's the trivia.
I'd say that's fair. Yeah. There we go. Good. Well, I certainly loved it at the end. Interested. There were things to say, Dan. Is what we learned.
Yeah, things to say. I'm very much sort of. I'm very interested in your opinion of the next episode more than anything else now, because I think the next episode is really gonna settle your whether you're gonna be. I can't even say that without spoiling it. No, we'll just wait till you see the next episode. I'm very curious to talk about the next one with you. Which is the King of Amushu. So yeah, we'll come back and tackle.
Well,
that.
anyone on Patreon, Dan, can just because if we see a good link, let's use it and then let's point it out, knobheads. But anyone that wants to hear that next episode, I believe they can do that on Patreon, can't they, Dan?
They can do that right now on our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You just go on, donate any amount that's above the $1 a month thing, and then you get access to all the content. We've got tiers, but the tiers just exist for what people want to donate. They don't actually give you anything different. Once you've got access to the Patreon, you've got access to all the content on the Patreon, and we do put out episodes 1 week early. And at the moment, we're doing that with these Analysing Avatar episodes. episodes. But once this sort of if we're looking at some point to take a small break in this, maybe after the first season, to go back to doing some rewind review podcasts. Those will also, be going up a week ahead of their YouTube and iTunes and Google Play release. So if you want to hear that episode right now, you can go do that, support us, and that helps. The other ways you can help us, of course, is by subscribing. I've mentioned it before, but I think it was like 60% of the people who watch our videos are not subscribed. We see you. Hit that button. Hit it. Press it. Press it.
Press the button. It really does help, I think. So we've been told.
So we've been told by every YouTuber ever. Also, hit the like button and all that. You can review us in-app if you're listening to the audio version of this on the Google Play apps, iTunes, all that stuff. Leave us a nice review. Those are apparently really important in the early days of a podcast. So please do that. If you, that's the best way you can support us at this stage, would be to give us a nice review so people know that this isn't just two idiots talking shite. Oh no, busted.
Actually, even if that's the review, you know what? This is two idiots.
Two idiots reviewing
talking shite about Avatar.
Please write that in the review. Two idiots talking shite.
That's fine by me.
I'm on board with that. I'm very much on board with that. Shite spelled SHITE.
Yeah.
Like shite. Like not shit, shite.
Shite, yeah. It's so effective. Shite. The difference for me, the difference between shite and shit is just so clear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a cultural osmosis thing, though. I don't think that I'm not sure anyone's ever written down like the definitions. Of those
it's just something you know.
It's just something you know. Like I've never read the definitions between those.
If someone was to say something I'd done was like, if I give in a piece of like a report, or if I do a bit of if I do a marketing strategy for someone or something like that, and someone says it's shite, that's so much more offensive than shit.
It's really, I don't know why.
Because I don't know. Anyway, right. See you later.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys in a week's time, unless you're good enough to go help us out, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, in which case we'll see you right now, like straight after this. Otherwise, though, see you in a week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
Come back in a week's time to hear us discuss the King of Amashu. That was a very presentery voice that I just tried to do, and it did not work. I will not be trying it again.
Some would say it was shite.
I think you accidentally used the word some when you went to say everyone.
Bye.
Bye.